Hello, my name is Ian Nelson, and for this final paper, I would like to present on nuclear energy and its possible uses and problems. To start out with, here's my thesis. Specifically, nuclear energy has been proven to be a clean, reliable source of power, which is capable of, meeting our needs as a society worldwide for electricity, as well as not contributing to any more carbon emissions. However, this technology is being massively underutilized for some reasons which I will claim. Specifically, the reasons only 20% of our total production of power is due to a bit of a problem of both supply and demand. On the supply side, things are a bit pricey for investors, and on the demand side, things are a little scary for the general public. To start with, in order to reduce our carbon emissions, we need to think about nuclear. Nuclear, just like all of the other environmental sources of power, produces no carbon emissions. This is untrue for things like coal, natural gas, or what's the third one? There's another one, oil. Thank you. So the goal of nuclear power is to combat our current climate crisis by phasing out these dirty forms of electricity generation and replacing them with cleaner forms of energy. And right now, I'm claiming that nuclear energy is the primary way to do this. Because we have this climate neutral approach through nuclear generation, we can allow the atmosphere to not get even more bombarded with nasty CO2 than it already is, and for things to like to settle down and reabsorb into the trees. So the main issue that nuclear energy is facing behind the scenes is its lack of investment. Currently, there aren't really a lot of nuclear plants being built compared to what many people think there is. There's like maybe a handful, and they're getting shut down as well. Because it is such a large and complicated piece of technology, a nuclear reactor is extremely expensive. They take about 6 years to build, and like light estimates put it at $5,000 per kilowatt of energy. If we were to make, say, let me do a little bit of quick math in my head, like a 10,000 kilowatt energy reactor, that would cost about $5 billion. Some sources put it to 6. Meanwhile, the price of a natural gas power plant is about a fifth or a sixth that at just about $1 billion for a 10,000 kilowatt energy reactor. Well, I mean, I suppose natural gas doesn't react to it. However, this looks scary. It is understandable for an investor not to want to just immediately dump $6 billion into a nuclear reactor when they can get much cheaper electricity from the natural gas plant. However, that's only thinking about the first few years of operation, as I will get into. The thing about nuclear power is the fuel is very small, fairly cheap. I mean, it's pretty expensive, but it's fairly cheap compared to natural gas and oil, especially considering that a nuclear reactor can go a long way with a very small amount of fuel. According to these wonderful graphs I have found over on the my finger pointed. Okay, over that side, from left to right, we got the stats for our lovely natural gas and coal power plants, a large estimate range for the nuclear power plants, and then right next to me here is some data I found on the costs of the fuels. As the years tick by, and as the cost of fuel overtakes and continues to chug along past the original construction of these plants and their costs, the fuel begins to show what a differential in pricing can do. The red and yellow lines on this graph are showing off the coal and natural gas and how their fuels prove to be more expensive over time compared to nuclear. So yes, if person A has made a nuclear plant and a person B has made a natural gas plant, at the beginning the person with the nuclear plant is in a lot of debt, but after 20 or 30 years they'll be making more money due to saving on fuel costs per kilowatt hour of energy. The other side of the coin for why we really aren't using nuclear power right now is there isn't a lot of demand from consumers. A lot of people have a misbelief that nuclear power is very scary. Things like, superhero comics, Peter Parker getting bit by a radioactive spider, that's a little dangerous. In The Simpsons, Homer Simpson works in a power plant with all this green glowing goo. It looks very scary. And this isn't even factoring in all of the really bad things like the constant threat of nuclear war and the word nuclear being tied to that, as well as more historical events, including the disasters at Three Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. Nuclear power isn't so popular. I wish it was. Unfortunately, a lot of people are very scared of it. According to several sources, including A Tale of Two Stances, Germany's development of and fear of nuclear energy, the dangers of radiophobia, and from nuclear to renewable energy system transformations and public attitudes, the populace have been highly affected by those historic disasters. In the 1970s and 80s, the disapproval rates for the use of nuclear energy went up from 20% to 60% over the course of about 10 years. And while things did cool off a little bit in 2011 following the wake of the Fukushima disaster, those levels hit around the same again within the American public. Similar things have been proven to be shown in China, in Japan, and in Germany, and specifically Japan and Germany have closed a large amount of their existing nuclear power plants due to these fears. And understandably, the investors are not willing to make more expensive projects like reactors discussed earlier if there's no demand from consumers. And there's low demand from consumers because these no investors are willing to put money into the project to prove it's safe. So it just kind of spirals endlessly into more and more bad news for nuclear. Admittedly, a lot of anti-nuclear activists do have a good point with the production of nuclear waste. This is a bit of an issue that scientists haven't really solved. There's been discussions about putting things under deserts, inside of mountains, etc. But for the time being, we still don't really know how to fully get rid of nuclear energy and its byproducts. Well, we spend the energy. But compared to other current forms of electricity generation, like natural gas, oil, and coal, the concept of nuclear waste is actually surprisingly safe. It's not great, it's still a problem, but it's the lesser of two evils. When a coal plant makes electricity, it sends a bunch of coal into the atmosphere and it causes all of the greenhouse gas. Versus if you have a barrel of nuclear waste, it's just going to sit there, and if you get too close to it, you will have some health problems, but it's not going to come to you the way that a lot of greenhouse gas emissions have in a lot of popular cities like LA and New York. As I put this funny dog here, the nuclear waste will stay in the hole you put it in compared to a lot of carbon emissions. And last, there are some solutions on the horizon coming to save us from our global warming fate. Two particular solutions I find noteworthy coincide very nicely with the supply and demand problems. In order to quell a bit of the consumer dread towards nuclear power, a lot of investment has been put into the safety of the contents within the reactors. Just like how airplanes are very safe, people still are afraid to fly due to the big crashes you hear on the news, but people are more likely to crash their car on the way to the airport. Similarly, a lot of safety has been put into nuclear reactors that have been modernized compared to the old ones that exploded, built in the 80s. One such very safe form of nuclear reactor is a molten salt thorium reactor, which, much like an elevator, utilizes a lack of electricity to trigger its own fail-safes. In order to not create a nuclear steam explosion, the molten salt reactor does not actually use water at all, rather utilizing a compound of fluoride salts that won't vaporate and fly everywhere in the event of an emergency. And to prevent said emergencies, the fuel used is thorium and not uranium. The difference between those two is thorium cannot produce radioactive energy on its own. It needs a catalyst, which is just a little tiny piece of plutonium, but not really enough to worry about. It is safe from nuclear armament. It is safe from meltdown, as the thorium is already melted. You can't have a surprise meltdown if you're expecting melt. And the best thing about these reactors are, because the reactor will stop making heat and spinning out of control with radiation, if it is separated from the catalyst, the heat triggered by a potential problem will melt the bottom of its container, allowing the salt and the thorium to drain away into a separate holding tank away from the catalyst. Additionally, in order to appeal to investors, another form of reactor called a small modular reactor has been researched. These are the things that people are looking into, like Bill Gates, for example, with his, I think it was called Terra Energy Solutions. The benefit of a small modular reactor is it is small, not big. If a big nuclear reactor is very expensive, a small nuclear reactor is not as expensive. And while, yes, you can't generate quite as much electricity with it, they are easier to manufacture for faster production time, so you could possibly link multiple together in series to create a smaller but equivalent output. This makes investors able to dip their toe into the water of a nuclear production facility much less dangerously than investing in a massive project would. Thank you for coming to my talk.